So the preconceptions that we bring to the table, whether it's withdrawing or with relationships or with our work, certainly with missionaries, going into another culture, those preconceived ideas can get in the way of what's actually there. The need for humility is something that is essential to this way of seeing, that we are willing to be changed by what we see. That if we're seeing something with humility, we're recognizing that we might be wrong.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Jennifer Trafton's new book is If Only We Could See, Reimagining Creativity, Compassion, and Calling Through the Extraordinary Life of Lilias Trotter. An historian, a visual artist, and a novelist, Jennifer is uniquely qualified to tell this story. In this episode, Jennifer and I talk about the remarkable life of artist and missionary Lilias Trotter. We also talk about the empathetic imagination, the value of seeing what is actually in front of you, and the role of humility in seeing clearly. Jennifer Trafton, I'm so excited to have you on the Habit Podcast to talk about your biography of Lilias Trotter, If Only We Could See. I love this. I also love this subtitle, Reimagining Creativity, Compassion, and Calling Through the Extraordinary Life of Lilias Trotter.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited about this book. I know you've been slogging away at it for a long time, and maybe we can talk about that.
It has been a long journey.
Maybe we can get into that here in a little while. But first, why don't you give us, some of our listeners will know who Lilias Trotter is and some won't. So tell us about Lilias Trotter. I'd love to hear about how you got interested in writing about her.
Yeah.
The floor is yours, Jennifer.
All right. Well, she's one of the most fascinating people I've ever met. I haven't met her in person yet. But so I first learned about her. I think I came across her name years ago because her name was familiar to me. But I first really learned about her when two friends suggested the same documentary, which is called Many Beautiful Things. I believe it's on YouTube and Amazon Prime. I recommend it to everyone. This was my introduction to Lilias's life and her art. It was this documentary. I cried at the end, and Pete will tell you I am not a crier at movies, but this one got me, and I watched it several times by myself with other friends, with Pete. I cry every time. I absolutely fell in love with this person, this amazing woman, and her adventurous life. And she was what I wanted to be when I grew up. So Lilias Trotter was born in the middle of Queen Victoria's reign. So she was a Victorian English woman who was born into an upper class, very privileged family, daughter of a banker, very educated and cultured, and she really had kind of access to like everything that a comfortable, privileged life would have meant in Victorian England. And she was also a very gifted painter. And she was kind of discovered in her early 20s by one of the most famous art critics and art teachers of her day, John Ruskin. He was a celebrity. I mean, John Ruskin, if John Ruskin liked your art, you had a career. So John Ruskin thought she was one of the most gifted, innately gifted students he'd ever encountered, and really told her she could be one of the most famous artists of her day if she gave herself completely to art. And we might talk more about this later, that the decision for her to not go in that direction. But so she didn't end up becoming the famous artist that we see on museum walls. And she could have, she's so good. But she had this other calling of this drive to love people, to serve God in many different ways. She did that first by being part of the newly founded YWCA in England at that time, the Young Women's Christian Organization, which was working with working girls who were flocking into London, in the wake of the Industrial Revolution. She was involved in rescuing victims of sex trafficking, would walk the streets at night, finding and befriending prostitutes who needed a bed and hope. She was helped to found a hostel for working girls and one of the first restaurants for women in England. So she was very, very much in the just kind of the vanguard of social reform and in the evangelical movement in Victorian England. And then when she was 35, felt the call to become a missionary to North Africa. Landed on the shores of Algeria with two friends, no organizational backing. All the mission agencies had turned her down for health reasons, didn't know the language, didn't know what they were going to do, landed in Algeria, and she spent 40 years as a missionary in Algeria. Just having like the most extraordinary life, taking camel rides across the Sahara Desert, and kept on painting. And well, we can talk a lot more about how this worked itself out in her life. But one of the things that really fascinated me was how she never stopped being an artist. She left behind her 40 years worth of gorgeously illustrated journals of her time in Algeria. And she was a wonderful writer as well. So her writing is beautiful, but then it's full of her drawings and her paintings of North Africa. She started the first mission agency that was founded and led by a Protestant woman. By the time of her death, her contemporaries called her a worldwide spiritual force, and she was known and respected by the leading mission leaders of her day, and yet we hardly know her at all now. Her name was really forgotten for a long time because her main legacy was relational. It wasn't institutional. She didn't start any great organizations or churches or anything like that, but she had this immense impact relationally on people. And so one of the thing that made me kind of cry at the end of each time I watched the documentary was that this woman who lived into her 70s, never married, never had children, dies in bed, surrounded by the people that she loved and mentored, at the heart of this sprawling house that had become the mother house of her mission, a kind of mecca for people from all over the world. She had built this incredible life of loving and mentoring others, and the picture of that at the end of her life was to me just the picture of a life well lived. And a picture of a life that had been lived out of the box, not following any conventional path, breaking all the conventions, breaking all the expectations. And, I've always felt like I didn't fit, anywhere, and I felt like out of the box and never followed a conventional path, and never really could figure out how my art and the rest of my life fit together very well, and never had children. And she just gave me this beautiful picture of what that can look like growing into old age, having that rich legacy that you're leaving behind you in art, in creativity, in relationships as well. So.
Jennifer, in the introduction of this book, I think it's the introduction, you mentioned that you didn't come to this story not so much as a historian, although I happen to know you're a historian. Not so much as an historian, but as a storyteller and an artist.
Yeah.
With an artist's questions, you said. Can you tell a little more about what you mean when you say you came at this with an artist's questions as distinct from an historian's questions?
Yeah, and I think I say maybe predominantly or primarily.
Yeah, right.
As you say, I don't know.
You are coming to this as an historian.
Yeah, and I don't know if many people know that I really my academic background and my training was in history and theology, church history. And I had been the editor of a church history magazine for a number of years before I came to Nashville, called Christian History and Biography. So I have that kind of historian's training in my background. But then since then, of course, I've done many other things, and I've been primarily a fiction writer. I've been illustrating, and so the last 10, 15 years has been more storyteller artist than historian. And as a historian, I come at the topic with, obviously with the objective of being, to kind of standing apart from the topic and keeping my own perspectives out of it, coming at it objectively, asking about, the influences and the forces that led to this or led to this person's point of view or actions, how this fits into what we know of the time period, how, what does Lilias tell us about the 19th century holiness movement, or, those kinds of things. And those questions are interesting to me. I have that history background. But this actually caused a big crisis for me in the writing of the book. That I actually hit a brick wall at one point about a third of the way through the first draft, because I was wearing all those different hats at once. I was wearing my historian's hat and my fiction writer's hat and my artist's hat, and they kind of had a just kind of a train wreck in my brain at one point, because I'd written the first third of the book really mainly with my historian's hat on, and I was deep in the weeds of 19th century background and Victorian theology and going down rabbit holes of research that were fascinating to me because I love those. I love archival research. I studied the 19th century, and I was going to write my dissertation at one point on George MacDonald. And so I was fascinated by all those questions, like how does this illuminate other aspects of the 19th century? But I was really getting down into the weeds. And I hit a wall because I felt like I was losing in that process. I was losing this other piece of myself and my perspective and what had given me joy to begin with about Lily. And the severe writer's block that I encountered at that point, I couldn't find my way past. The only way I eventually could break out of that was I asked one day, what is it that delights me about Lily? Like, where is my delight? My brain is interested in all these different rabbit trails, and that's great, but where was my delight? What is it that I, Jennifer, with my weird idiosyncratic, point of view and interest and stuff, where do I connect with Lily? And I realized that the answer to that was colors. I love colors. I love colors with a visceral love. I mean, there's something that is delicious to me about certain colors. They give me a thrill, and my own art has always been very, very colorful. I don't know how to tone things down very well. And one of the thing that I just loved about Lily, and sorry, I call her Lily because that's how everybody knew her at the time. That was her name to all of her friends and family. What I loved about her is her writing as well as her art was like a cascade of colors all the time. I can't even describe it to you. When you read her journals, especially, in addition to her other writings, but especially her journals, I mean, she will go on for paragraphs about the colors that she's seeing at every little shade and hue and noticing these colors. And it is with her a visceral kind of love. Like there's something more than just an aesthetic appreciation going on there. And then, of course, the colors of her paintings are so beautiful. But I thought, this is the weird thing in me that's connecting to this kind of weird thing in her. And that was the lifeline to get me back into the book with that sense of delight. And the other thing that got me out of that writing, I was at a complete standstill, was I started to write just as a way of kind of getting myself back into the world. I started to write about my own personal engagement with Lily, And I sat down and actually wrote about the Camino. The Pete and I walked the Camino de Santiago, a 500-mile pilgrimage across Spain, right after I signed the contract for this book. So I literally, I think that we just landed, or we were on the plane or something, signed the contract. And then we started off on this walk, and I took Lily's, her parables books with me on my Kindle, and was listening to her and thinking about her the whole walk. And so I just started to write about that as a way into why is it that Lily is not just an intellectual, historical topic to me? Why does she have such a profound, visceral effect on me personally? And there was those two things. It was the colors and this deeper personal spiritual engagement with what she taught me and how she saw the world. Those were the things that drew me to her. And so that kind of broke open the writing process again for me. And I was able to come back into the book. And at that point, I completely restructured it. And all of the chapters are named after colors on her palette. And they're each a different facet or window into aspects of her life and her world and her thought. So it's a bit more of an impressionistic portrait of Lily than a straight biography.
You resisted the temptation to do here's the 100 pages about her childhood, and here's
and I had started out that way, and I don't want to do this. Like, this is just not me. This is and so on that Camino. Sorry, I know this is a long way around to answering your question, but the historian in me kept on, trying to be historically accurate. That's still there. Yeah. The artist in me is looking at her paintings and saying, "Why did you paint that? Why did you? Why did that little detail on that building merit sitting down in the midst of your busy life and spending several hours doing this incredibly detailed, exquisite little watercolor?" And by the way, her paintings are tiny. The difficulty finding an image for the cover of my book was primarily because her paintings are so small, and the one that ended up on the cover is one of the largest. And so, that's about how big it is. And so they're very small, but they're intricately detailed.
You mentioned that when you went to her archive, they gave you a magnifying glass.
If you go to the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, they'll have some of her in the special collections. They have some of her early sketchbooks, like when she was in her 20s, and they'll give you a magnifying glass because they're so small and detailed. I don't know. I thought of Fabergé eggs. Have you ever seen like just these little detailed, just exquisite works of art? So I wanted to know, and I knew this starting out. I wanted to follow her life and through the biographical information we had about her and through her writings, but I wanted to follow her art and see what is she painting and why, what catches her eye, what is she drawn to, why is she using this color so much, why is white and light everywhere in her paintings, why is she stopping and noticing this woman washing clothes under the house? What are the things that she's drawn to as an artist, and what does that tell us about what she's loving, what she's delighting in? So that was partly the artist in me of what is she drawn to and why? Why is she painting it this way? Why is she using this color? Why is she using this technique? Then the other aspect, the storyteller and the personal aspect of it. While we were hiking the Camino, we met up with some friends of ours, Julie and Matt Canlis, who I think a lot of people will know. And I was telling them about, kind of the dilemma of how I was going to write this book, how I was going to approach this. And they highly recommended a book by Amy Frykholm called Julian. It's about Julian of Norwich. And I think it's Frykolm. Amy Frykholm. They said it was a beautiful biography, but she takes a very unique approach, a very imaginative approach. And so I read that as well on the Camino, and that profoundly influenced the way I ended up writing my book. Because Amy Frykholm says right at the beginning that biography is an act of empathetic imagination, that we are we are trying to imaginatively put ourselves into this person's world, their point of view that is very different from our own, that it is an act of imagination, and that we are, that in order to do so, we're setting aside our preconceived ideas and our judgments, and we're just trying to empathetically put ourselves in that person's place, much like we do with a character in a story. Yeah. And so her book is, and she says this at the beginning, she's filling it with details that she's imagining, that she's pulling from the historical time period, but it's an approach that makes Julian feel very contemporary and very real, like somebody we know, somebody we can relate to. And I wanted to make Lily feel that real to people. I wanted people to feel like they were coming into her life and into her world, to see it and feel it from her perspective, and for her to feel like a real concrete person. And so in order to do that, I put my storyteller's hat back on, and really thought about her as like a character in a story, and the way that I get into the head of a character of the story, and what they might be feeling and thinking, and what the room is looking like to them in this moment, to try to get a sense of who she was under the surface. Not that we can know completely, but that was an imaginative process for me as well. That's a long answer to your question. I'm sorry.
By the way, how long did it take you to write this book?
Well, 3 years from the contract signing to, I think, I finished yours. I need to count exactly how long that was. The first year, I wasn't doing a lot of writing. The first year, most of the archives were closed because of COVID and things like that. So I was doing a lot of research, really got into the archives of her journals a year later, and then spent 2 years writing. Yeah.
And how long were you stalled out? Were you stalled out for a long time, or? Yeah. I
mean, I was just stalled out. I was just spinning my wheels for a very long time, doing lots of just rabbit trail research, writing lots of pieces of things. I had, buckets full of lots and lots of quotes and ideas and pieces of writing, but I just couldn't find my way towards the shape of the book.
Yeah. I love that idea that it was getting back in touch with your delight is what made it possible for you to do this. I mean, this is a big piece of work. It would be really painful to do that much work with no delight.
Yeah.
And I know people do it all the time, right? I mean, sometimes people just slog through and make it happen, but
I'm not good at slogging through. Like writing is so hard for me, hard that if I have to slog, it's probably never going to get done. I really needed to be led by delight in this case. Yeah.
Well, delight is so relevant to the Lilias Trotter's story anyway.
Yeah.
There's the mirroring between your own need to connect with delight and her gift for connecting with delight seems really relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that she was a protege of John Ruskin.
Yes.
And an idea that I don't know if that was important to Ruskin, and that comes up over and over again in your book, is the idea that that we have to actually see that an artist has to see what's actually there, not what they think is going to be there, what they think they're supposed to see, but they have to see what they see, and then give an account of what they've seen.
Yes.
And that's so important to the way you talk about Lilias Trotter throughout this book.
Her whole life. Like it's her whole life, yeah.
Yeah, actually seeing what's there. And having the humility to see what's there instead of, I already know what I'm going to see, and therefore that's what I'm going to see, which is how I think most of us go through life most of the time.
I certainly do, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, maybe we should use I statements here instead of talking about what people generally do.
Yeah.
Would you say are the barriers to seeing what's actually in front of us?
That's something that Lily thought about a lot. she wrote about, about seeing and sight being so spiritually important. Have you ever taken a drawing class, Jonathan?
I have taken enough of a drawing class to do that first lesson where they make you actually draw a tree and everybody draws an idea of a tree instead of an actual tree.
Have you ever done?
I've done that first lesson.
Have you ever done a contour drawing?
No.
Did you ever do that? So this is often an exercise that is common in drawing classes for beginners, but anyone really. So contour drawing is when you have to look at an object that you're drawing and never look at your paper. Sometimes there's a barrier put between you and your paper. And so your pencil is following the thing that you're drawing. But you can't look down at your paper and fix it or do anything. And
you're not talking about tracing. You mean the thing is out in front of me.
The thing is out in front of you. You're drawing on the paper, but you're not looking at the paper, and you're not picking up your pencil at all. And so the point is that you're letting your eye and your hand kind of move together. Yeah. And as your eye moves, your hand is supposed to be kind of moving along with your eye, and you're following the shape of the thing that you're drawing. Okay. So very, very slowly following the exact contour of what you're drawing. And then you look at your paper and you see, and it's usually not at all what you would have drawn. But the point is that we don't spend that time really, really, really looking at that object when we're quickly drawing it's a combination of like what we're seeing, but what we think we're supposed to be drawing and what looks good on our paper. And so a contour drawing will help to practice that slow seeing, that slow patient attention. But it's scary, because you're not looking down at your paper. You're not fixing it. You're not making it look good while you're doing it. It's just training your eye and your hand to move, together.
Do people get better at this, by the way?
I think so. And I think that some artists will do this as an exercise for themselves, just to, like scales for a musician. Yeah. And Lily actually did a number of contour drawings in her journals. But the point is that if we are often one of the barriers to seeing is our preconceived ideas of what something looks like. We know what a tree looks like, so we'll draw a tree. We know what this person is like, so we make preconceived ideas about what, so the preconceptions that we bring to the table, whether it's with drawing or with relationships or with our work, certainly with missionaries, going into another culture, those preconceived ideas can get in the way of what's actually there. Our pride in what we're doing, what we're making, what we're, our own work of making our art look good, or our, whatever it may be that we're concerned about, our reputation will get in the way. Yeah. Like the need for humility is something that is essential to this way of seeing, that we are willing to be changed by what we see. Like, I think that's a big part of it. That if we're seeing something with humility, we're recognizing that we might be wrong. Mm-hmm. We might be wrong in the way we thought this tree was going to look. We might be wrong about this person or this idea. Yeah. And so the willingness to be changed by what we see, I think, is a really important piece of that as well. And that is also hard and scary. And so this was something that I think Lily did beautifully when she was painting and drawing. Her art is like just an exquisite capture of what is there in front of her. That close attention to nature and to detail is throughout her art, but it's also evident in the way that she related to people, in the way that she thought about her vocation, in the way that she over time changed. So she went over to Algeria, as I said, not really knowing anything about what she was getting herself into. But people in the West, people in England had a lot of preconceived ideas about the Arabs and about the place where she was going. And she went with this humble attitude of seeing the people first, hearing their stories, being there in the midst of them, not keeping herself distant like the other tourists or Europeans who lived there, but getting down into the midst of their life, climbing into the frame of the painting rather than just simply, standing on the outside, and understanding life from their perspective. And that changed her over the course of her life and shaped how she approached her missionary work, how she related to them. So that's one of the things that I love to see, is that humility that is played out in her life. Even after 40 years, she's still learning. She's still revising her views. She's still changing her actions based upon what she is seeing and taking in from other people.
Well, it's as you demonstrate in your book, the act of humility makes vision possible.
Yeah.
When you are willing to say, whatever is in front of me, I'm going to see it, instead of, I already know what I'm going to see. When you already know what you're going to see, that's all you can see.
Yeah. At the end of her life, she wrote, at the encouragement of some missionary leaders that she knew, she wrote and illustrated a book for English readers called Between the Desert and the Sea. And it was intended to be a book that was introducing this land of Algeria and North Africa for people who had never been here. At the very beginning, she says, that the whole purpose of this book, both the art and the writing, is to make you see. And she said, many things begin with seeing in this world of ours. So she was so concerned about helping people to see the land and the inhabitants, not as a tourist would. And she says that tourist guidebooks will take you so far. They'll show you the main sites, and they're showing you the externals. But she said it takes love and friendship to enter in to the house and see it from the inside. And so she said we're gonna take that road of intimate friendship. We're gonna go inside the house. We're gonna see the people, and it was that willingness to go inside and really spend the time to become friends and to develop relationships that it then allowed her to see what the tourists never saw.
Yeah.
And then she tried to get other people to see that as well, because she wanted the folks back home to love the Algerian people that she loved. Yeah.
Love what she loved. Yeah. There's nothing. That's kind of all you can hope for as a person who makes art is, can I help people love what I love?
And for her, that was about seeing. Like she when she saw, she loved, and so then she tried to help others see. Yeah.
People like me who know just a little bit about Lilias Trotter before I read your book know that she gave up her art to go to Algeria. That she could have been the greatest, but she gave up her art to go do this other thing. And as you say, she never gave up her art.
No, she did it certainly was a sacrifice, and I don't want to undermine that at all. So when people ask, why did she always paint so small? That for the rest of her life, she was primarily drawing and painting in notebooks, in sketchbooks, or paintings that are gifts for people. And so, she's sacrificing in one sense the ability to just paint, a lot and big and, things that you would see on the wall of a museum. I think that is as much of a tragedy for the rest of us as for her, that we don't have these exquisite paintings of hers are in a box in an archive in London in a basement someplace, when they should be in a museum. Yeah. And those who knew her very well said to the end of her life, she did feel the pain of not being able to spend the time to bring those talents and those gifts she had to their full fruition. So she felt the pain of somebody who loves, to paint and can't do it as often as she wants and to the full.
Sounds like she loved too many different things.
She did. And she wrote about that very thing. But she never left behind her art. So even after she told Ruskin that she couldn't completely, fully, 100%, dedicate herself to that one thing, she kept studying with him. She would visit him. He would visit her. While she was in Africa, she would continue to send him her work, send him paintings. So she continued that relationship with Ruskin till he died. She continued learning from him. As I said, there are 40 years worth of gorgeous journals and diaries left behind that are full of her art. She made art for other people. When the Algiers Mission Band that she founded ended up creating a little magazine for people back home for years, and she would illustrate the covers, and she would fill it with drawings as well as photographs and other things. The reports were drawn from her journals and told stories and used all the metaphorical language she loved. Because, and she would say again and again, if only I can make people see. I just want you to be able to see what we're seeing. And so the band that she founded was that they incorporated art and beauty into everything they did. And that was really unique for the time. Everything they did added that touch of beauty. If they were giving out Arab Bibles, they would decorate the margins because they knew that the Arab people, the Algerians, loved. And one little correction here. The Algerian people are more than just the Arab ethnicity. So there are others as well, but she was primarily focused on the Arab population within Algeria. If any North Africans are listening, I do know the difference. But she was primarily called to the Arab people. And she saw how much they loved color, and they loved beauty, and they loved story and metaphor, and that's how it was so baked into them. And she noticed that about them. She noticed how they arranged the fruit in the marketplace, showed their love for color and their understanding of color. And the kids that they brought into the mission, she saw their love for color. And so God brought this color-loving woman who had supposedly given up art into a culture that loved color as viscerally as she did.
Yeah.
And who better to communicate with them than somebody who could speak that language of color and beauty and metaphor and story. Yeah. And so she wrote stories, she wrote parables especially for Arab children, but also for adults. They incorporated art and illustration. They held painting and needlework classes for the children. One of the young women who came to work for her, she saw this talent for design in this one woman and really encouraged that. And so this young woman became a beautiful designer and was able to then illustrate an illuminated manuscript of the Gospel of John later with, Lilias' encouragement. Because of her influence, the Nile Mission Press, which is the kind of the main publishing house that they worked with to publish tracts and books for Arab readers, they hired a full-time artist, an illustrator for their work, somebody who could come and study the artwork and the artistic style of that culture and use that to make their work feel native to the culture. And that would not have happened without the influence of Lily. So in so many ways, she literally kept up her artwork. But then as I found more and more as I was writing, that just artist's way of seeing the world spilled over into everything, even when she wasn't painting. And we've talked about that it affected how she saw people and how she led, how she mentored, how she her whole theological outlook on life was just through and through shot with this this artistic love for beauty and this visionary
and a willingness to be surprised. I mean, that's something you talk about a little bit. It was this knowledge that one of the aspects of reality is that it surprises us every day.
Yeah, always, always looking at somebody, like a lot of people that she worked with commented on this childlike sense of delight and surprise and enthusiasm, that she was like a little child, always looking for the next, beautiful thing that God was going to show her. Or even when she was bedridden at the end of her life, she loved it when the younger folks would come in and tell her what they'd seen that day, and tell her about a beautiful thing or a beautiful, an exciting thing. She loved that, anything that just showed her a new facet of God, of his world, of how the Spirit works in people. And she was very willing to be led by the Spirit and without knowing where it was going to carry her. Not needing to know what the results were going to be, not needing to know what God's plan was, just trying to detect, like, where does he seem to be leading right now, and then leave the future to him. So,
Okay, we've got, before we run out of time, we got to talk about George MacDonald, who was very important to Lilias Trotter, very important to you also. Tell me about the role of George MacDonald in her life. And I learned from your book something that I was amazed at, that John Ruskin and George MacDonald knew each other.
Yes, they did. So back in when I was just getting started and didn't even know where the book was going to lead me, my friend Kirsten Jeffrey Johnson, who many Abbott and Robert Run people will know, who I'd known for 25 years. She is the world expert on George MacDonald. Nobody knows MacDonald like her. And when she heard that I was going to write about Lilias Trotter, she said, "Oh my goodness, this friend of mine, Reverend John McNeil, he just discovered a letter that Lily wrote to MacDonald at the end of his life, MacDonald's life." And I went through the roof with excitement because I loved MacDonald. And I knew that there was a kind of a tenuous, maybe, relationship between the two of them. They were contemporaries, but I didn't know if she had ever met him or read anything about him.
You say contemporary. She was a child, and he was a
he was basically her father's generation.
Okay,
so
not her grandfather's generation,
the younger generation.
Gotcha.
And so I was so excited. So this letter that she wrote to him at the end of his life was basically like a fan letter. And she said that when she was 13 years old, she had read one of his novels and that it had opened a new world for her. And then she mentioned some other things that he had written that also influenced her. And I found subsequently lots of mentions in her writings and her journals, quotes from him. So, but this novel that he wrote that she read, it's called The Seaboard Parish. And this is a novel in which he, as Kirsten told me, and she a lot of what I know about the relationship between MacDonald and Ruskin, I know from Kirsten. This is a book that he wrote after Ruskin had spent a lot of time with MacDonald family. And it's a book in which he's directly engaging with Ruskin's ideas about beauty and art and being an artist and seeing and what it means to see, all of these things. This is the book where he's dealing with that directly, and he even bases a character on Ruskin. Wow. And so Lily reads this as a 13-year-old, having just lost her father to an illness, which was a devastating wound in the family. Her sister later remembers that after the death of Lily's father, Lily just became much more deep, that there was something going on spiritually with this young girl that they didn't really know, but they saw the effects of. And now we know that, amongst other things, she was reading MacDonald during that period. Yeah. And she was reading a story which was about this family, that includes a young girl who loves to draw, and they meet a young painter. And it's a book in which MacDonald talks about not only about art and seeing, but about how God's truth is just shining through the beauty of the natural world, and how nature itself is It's like the house that God has decorated just for his children. And throughout this house, there are all of these pictures of God, pictures of resurrection, pictures of his truth. And so some of his most poignant statements about imagination and nature and God as an artist, and what we do as artists, are in this particular book that she read as a 13-year-old. And it seems to me that that just kind of set a tone for the rest of her life in so many ways. And you see echoes of that all the way up until the end of her life, when she's like, one of the last Bible studies she gives for her co-workers, she quotes MacDonald and the God of joy that we see through the faces of the flowers, which is something that the MacDonald talked about. So that is not so much a theory of the imagination, but an experience, an embodiment of what it means to live and go through the world with that imaginative way of seeing and of loving the creator who made what we see and learning more about him through the pictures of his creation. Yeah. That is what she ended up doing for the rest of her life, and writing for other people. And so two of the books that are in print still by her are Parables of the Cross and Parables of the Christ Life, that are both books, beautifully illustrated books in which she uses, just as MacDonald taught her, uses these things in nature as windows through which we see so many truths about God and about our Christian life, and kind of uses these God's picture book of nature as a way of learning more about him and about, So that was an exciting thing for me to learn, and Kirsten had really helped me to understand that whole triangular connection between these three amazing people.
Well, our listeners will need to get the book and learn more about this, because you were really just skimming the surface. I mean, we don't have much time left. You could only skim the surface, but there's so many interesting things there. Okay, toward the end of the book, you ask a rhetorical question that I'm going to ask you non-rhetorically. I'm going to challenge you to answer it.
Okay.
You ask, what realities might open up before us if we could adopt Lilias Trotter's vision of the new creation? I would like to know from you, what realities have opened up for you as you've put on your Lilias Trotter glasses these last few years, especially with regard to the new creation, to resurrection.
Yeah. I think that two things come to mind. One is that I've never really thought about prayer as imagining in God's presence. And that's what I felt like I was seeing so often in Lily. That imagining and dreaming dreams and like kind of taking the top off of the present moment and just seeing what could be, that for her was a deeply spiritual practice, a part of her prayer life, and something that she believed was part of faith. And so that freedom that she felt to just simply ask questions and imagine what things might be like. She's thinking about, like, what will our resurrection bodies be like, and maybe they're this, and maybe they're that, and what if when a beloved coworker died, she's just imagining what this person might be doing, or what, like, the questions that we, like, a lot of us ask about what might happen, but she allows herself to just live in those what ifs and might be's in a way that gave her joy, and that was never presumptuous to her, because she knew that whatever God's plan is far better than this. So I think that freedom to imagine in God's presence is one thing that I love about her. But the other thing that, and this is, again, one of the reasons why she affected me so much way back at the beginning when I watched the documentary, is her understanding of vocation and our calling is not something that is bound by this world alone. Yeah. And so even though she lived in some ways an outwardly unsuccessful life by some standards, she didn't leave behind any permanent institutions. We don't read about her in history books. She planted a lot of seeds. That's what she saw herself as doing. And she mentored a lot of people who were also feeling that sense of, am I wasting my life? Are we failing? Are we, we're not seeing the fruits of our labors. So that constant temptation to be discouraged and to think that our little lives, our little callings with a little bit of fruit is not enough. It's not worth anything. And her answer to this was that forward-looking, this insight that our calling on the earth and our calling, that what God calls us to, is not something that ends when we die. Mm-hmm. And it is not something that we need to see the fruits of during our life. Mm-hmm. That we're planting seeds, and that those seeds will bear fruit into eternity. So the new heavens and the new earth this is going to be a place where we are going to be doing things. Yeah. There will be things to do. There will be things to create. There will be people to love. There's one point where she's even wondering if there is life on other worlds, if there is life and development that is still to come. I mean, if you read between the lines, she's speculating about aliens. And she says at one point that the harvest of the trivial and the monotonous might lie out beyond the stars. So, so she had such an expansive vision of what the future would hold. That it is not an end of something. It's not something that is static, but that the seeds that we're planting now in ways that we cannot even imagine will bear fruit in God's time. And that may be on the earth in human history, beyond our lives. It might be, way down the road in eternity. Yeah. And so that... She
talks about that idea of coal as being, the sunshine from millennia ago, collected in these trees and now on the ground, and those trees seem dead, but now they come back to life. And that's maybe what some of our work will be. And so that she was known for her optimism amongst her coworkers and colleagues in spite of so many setbacks, because she had this expansive view of the future. That was real to her. Like that future was as real to her as tomorrow. Yeah. And she had this incredible trust that God would take whatever our little work is right now, and that it will bear fruit sometime. Yeah. When I read her passage about the coal in the ground, that the tree collected the sunshine, died, was buried, and now had no way of knowing that thousands of years later it would sort of bring light and warmth to people. I thought about your book and the fact that Lilias Trotter, who in so many ways has been forgotten, is being brought back to life, being sort of shining again in this book in ways that for many people, for the huge majority of people, she's been forgotten. And so it's
not just me. There are others who are rediscovering her, and that's exciting to me to see her being unearthed again.
Yeah. Well, I'm really grateful for your part in that.
Thank you.
And I think this is going to be a really. You're right. There are lots of people who've been unearthing her, but it's hard not to look at your book, If Only We Can See, and not think of it as a major contribution to that. So thanks for this work, I think it's going to do a lot of people a lot of good. It's done me a lot of good already. So thanks, Jennifer, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.